No, thank you. We're going to start exactly on Tzad Gimel on the top. Oh, thank you. Thank Hashem. Thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. That's what's our learning. We should have the Beis Hamikdash immediately. Okay. So refuah shlema for all those that were injured. It starts like this. Rami Bar Chama Rav Chisda. Rami Bar Chama asks Rav Chisda a question. Uh, 93. We just started. 93. We said before that there were some questions going on here, some interesting questions. The next one. Nitas al beged tamei. We were talking about that the blood of a chatas that spritzes on the beged. The rule is that on a beged, on a garment, the garment needs to be washed in the holy place, in the azara. And that was the rule. So here it's spritzed on a beged that's tamei. Now the blood becomes tamei from the beged, and we learned before that blood that was puzzled for sprinkling doesn't require kibbutz. So do we say, what's the din? Do we say that the blood is now puzzled because when it touched the beged it became puzzled, and puzzled blood doesn't need to be washed? Do we say that at the time that it touched the beged it was still tar? When it touched, it's like it became tamei. So how do we view this? So do we say that it was tar when it touched, or do we say that it was tamei when it touched? We spoke about the airspace of a vessel. Now, we were saying that maybe the airspace of a vessel would that was of a knife. Airspace of a knife we were concerned about. We said because the airspace of the beged would be problematic for the oif because the oif doesn't require a keli. So you already messed it up when you put it into a keli. So we said that you put it directly on top of it. But here we're talking about it requires a keli. The fact that it's a beged is not problematic. The problem is that there's blood going on a beged. But what would make the blood puzzle is the tumah. Amar Rav Huna Breder Rav Yeshua. We jump a few generations here. Rav Huna Breder Rav Yeshua is the Talmud of Abaye and Rava. It's a friend of Rav Papa. So he says, Midakam bin Baile Hachi. The fact that Rami Bar Chama, generations earlier, right, the son-in-law of Rav Chisda, is his teacher's friend. The fact that he asked this question, Shema Mina, we can see that he holds that Haisala Shasa Kaisher Benifsala Ein Damatan Kibbutz. That if something was eligible at one time and then it became not eligible, it doesn't need laundry. See, there was one opinion that held that once it was eligible at one time, it will always need to be laundered. It's only if it was never eligible. That was one opinion. Now there's another opinion that holds that if it was one time eligible and then it became not eligible, so now it does not need. Yeah, we're not talking about that. It was sprinkled yet. It was before it was sprinkled. Splashed on the clothes before it was sprinkled. Right? And the question is, it was eligible at one point to be sprinkled, right? And it spritz on his clothing. The problem is clothing were tummy. The only problem is honey mili b'zeh. When do we say that it would not require to be laundered? That would be if it was one after another. At first it became puzzle, and then it spritzed on the clothing. Aval bas achas, but becoming tamei at the same moment that it's touching the clothing, he doesn't say this. Or maybe it doesn't matter. and maybe even if it becomes puzzle exactly as it touches the clothing, because going onto the clothing maybe is a problem itself. I'm not sure, but it's not a cliche. Maybe it is a cliche, but it's not meant for the dam. He said, but here the simultaneous tuma together with the touching it is invalidating the blood. Maybe it doesn't need to be laundered. You follow the question? Question is, if the beged is if the blood is puzzle when it touches the beged, it doesn't need laundering. So here,
it already was.
Yeah, it's only blood that's eligible to be sprinkled needs laundering. The special law of laundering in the holy place and all that. Here, it touched the beged that was tummy. So as it's touching the beged, it already is becoming puzzle simultaneously with touching the beged. Do we say that when would we not require laundering if it would have been puzzle before it touched it, but not when it touched it exactly? That was simultaneous. Now it still requires laundering, or maybe not. Maybe it still doesn't require. This is the question of Rami Bar Chama. Whatever the case is, Rav Huna Beid Rav Yeshua, I'm sorry?
It's like splitting hairs.
Yeah. Rav Huna Beid Rav Yeshua said that we see that Rami Bar Chama would require laundering even if would exempt from laundering if it had Shasa Kaisher, even though it was eligible at one time, if it became possible later. Okay. Amalei, so Rav Chisda says to Rami Bar Chama, look to the Rabbi Lezer v'Rabbanan aliba de Rabba, to the Kamatar Tzabaya. Gives him this whole long spiel that we're gonna go through to figure this out. To Machlekes Rabbi Lezer and Rabbanan, according to the way Abaya answers the Rabbah. The Tanya, get ready. The Tanya was taught in a brayso. Rabbi Lezer says, Mechatas. It's Rabbi Lezer maybe. Rabbi Lezer says, Mechatas. This is the water of the para aduma. They put the ashes into it. Shenitmu, that it became tamei. Mitarin, they still work, even though the water became tamei, but it still works.
From an external reason.
It became tamei for external. Yeah, some small minor tuma will still work to purify someone that was tamei mes, someone that had a major tuma. Shaharei, because I'll prove it to you. Because who's saying this is the brayso of Rabbi Lezer's talking. Shaharei nida mazin Allah. A woman that's a nida that became tamei mes. So now she has two problems. First of all, she's a nida, she's tamei as a nida, but that's not a big problem. She goes to the mikveh, that's fine. But then she also became tamei mes. So now we sprinkle the water of the paraduma on her. When the water of the paraduma touch her, the water becomes tamei nida, right? Right? At the moment it touches her, she becomes tamei nida. But nevertheless, it still works. V'amar Rabbah, and Rabbah says, Rabbi Elazar that says this. Shitas Rabbi Akiva Rabbi Yamra. Oh, so it's Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua. He's following the opinion of Rabbi Akiva's teacher. The Amar that Rabbi Akiva said, Havaras Kli al Gabi Makam Tamei Kimunach Tamei. Says that taking a vessel over on the ear space, over something that's tamei, it's as if it was placed down on the tama.
And it becomes tamei.
So this is a proof that the water that became tamei still works. Notice that he's not using the simultaneous. That why is the water becoming tamei? Not because it's touching the woman that's tamei, but because as it's going over, it's becoming tamei. He's adding something that wasn't necessarily the original issue. It's the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. The Tanan, as was taught in the Mishnah, if there was a person that's standing outside an oven, the oven was tamei, and the person is standing outside it. The sheretz b'tana. In the Tana, in the oven, is a sheretz. He sticks his hand through into a window, but not less a lugin, and he takes the lugin is the jug that has the water of the tatas. The vir al piataner, and he passes it over the airspace of the tanner. Rabbi Kiva mitami. Rabbi Kiva says it becomes tummy because Rabbi Kiva holds that something. I think he holds kluta kamisha huncha, something that flies over. We had this in Masechta Shabbos. Something that flies over the airspace is as if it rested. Rabbi Kiva's opinion was if you throw something through from Rosh Hashanah into Rosh Hashanah and out the other window, so you see someone's window open on both sides, and you throw a ball straight through both windows. So he holds that you just violated laws of Shabbos by bringing in and also taking out, because he considers that everything that's passing through is considered rested.
We learned that by Gittin also.
Yes, we had it in Gittin also. Yeah, there was something like that.
Yes.
We asked the question, I remember in Shabbos, we asked the question that they said, what if a bird flies over a boiling pot of milk, according to Rabbi Akiva?
Right, I remember. Yeah.
Is it milk?
No, it's not
No,
milk.
because he holds that it's considered like rested. Okay,
What?
so the rule over here is Rabbi Akiva mitame, chum mitarin. And they argue, this is a machlekes. Rabbi Akiva savar that the vessel that goes over the airspace of the Tanner is kamunach tam, it's if it rested. Rabbanan Sabri love kamunach tam. Rabbanan hold that it's not considered rested. Ve'isvei Abaye, we're not finished. What Rav Chisda is telling back to Rami Bar Chama. Remember, Rami Bar Chama asked Rav Chisda the question. So Amar Lei, Rav Chisda says back to him, right? Ve'isvei Abaye, and Abaye asks on Rabbah, who was quoting this, that Rabbi Lazar holds like Shitas Rabbi. He asks, he says, Meider Rabbi Akiva agrees, that if someone's sprinkling the mechatas, the water of the paraduma, on a person that's tamei, the right that needs the water, but it passes over a kli cheres, ayal gabi mishkav meishav tamei, or on top of a bed or a mat or a chair of a zav, that's tamei. Shehi tayra, that the water is still tar. She'ein l'cha davar shemetame l'mayla kalamata. There's nothing that's metame above it. Elakazayis min ames b'shar kol hamehilim la'asuyei even amnagas. The only thing that could make something tamei without touching would be something like a kazai, like an olive size of a corpse that could make tamei in a house or something like that. If something goes above it, it becomes tamei. But here, Rabbi Kiva would agree. Yeah, but Rabbi Kiva would agree that it shouldn't become tamei just by passing over airspace. Yeah, because passing over it is you're being mahil. When you go over it, you become a tent over it. So you become. If the roof doesn't block it for whatever reason, it's tumurutzutza or something. So then there's nothing blocking it, and you go over it, so you'll become tamei by going over it. Or if you're under a roof together with it. But here we're talking about passing over. Elamar Abaye, so Abaye says the Kuli Alma. Rather, everyone holds the entire world, which is two people. Chacham and Rabbi Akiva. He said, "Lav kimunach tami." It's not considered that it's considered rested. So the water of the chatas that passes over the tana that had the sheretz in Israeli tar. Really, the machlekes is a little different. Rabbi Akiva suffered gozrinan. Rabbi Akiva says that we make a decree, Shema Yanuach, lest you put it down. Rabbanan Sabi Legos, we don't make that degree. Rabbi Akiva would agree with sprinkling that if it passes over the tumah, even the nafak, that it's not going to be a problem once it leaves his hand, because he can't put it down anyway. He's not able. You can't make a decree on something that's already left his hand. That maybe you're going to put it down while you're passing it over.
Meaning because he can't control it.
He can't control it. He's already sprinkled it. So if he sprinkles it over, that's not going to be a problem. Now the Gemara explains. when he's sprinkling, he spritz it. Rabbi Lazar says that the mechatas that becomes tamei is mitar. What was his support? See, Rabbi Lazar said mechatas shenitmu mitarin, and his reasoning for that was because in nida you can sprinkle on her. It says his support was Rabbi Lazar Rabbanan b'may kamiflagi. What are the Rabbi Lazar and the Rabbanan arguing about? Amar Rabaya b'danin tuma keduma mituma shabayis kamiflagi. Do we say that if the tuma came first, it's exactly like when the tuma is happening right now? Mar Savar Danin. Rabbi Lazar says that the fact that when it's sprinkled on a nida, right now the nida is tamei, which means that the water that touches the nida becomes tamei as you're sprinkling, which means at the moment of contact, you have two things. You have the sprinkling and you also have the water becoming tamei. So, you see, if the water's tamei and it still is effective on a nida, it must mean that even if the water was tamei before, it wouldn't be a problem. And the Rabbanan hold, Mar Sava, the Rabbanan hold, and the Rabbanan say, no, there's a big difference between if it was tamei before than if it's tamei simultaneous with the contact. She does become tar. You're sprinkling the water of a paraduma on a woman that's needed becomes tar. That's Rabbi Lazar's proof that you can use tamei water to make a person tar. The problem is that what I mean, the water is tar until it touches her. And when it touches her, it's already effective. So how was that a proof to water that was tamei when you sprinkle on a nida? And the nida at the moment it hits her, she becomes tar before it even becomes tamei. Or simultaneously, the water was tar to begin with. So how is that a proof? So we're saying no. The reason why it's a proof is because Rabbi Lazar holds whether it happened earlier or whether it happens simultaneous, it's the same thing. This is what we're going back to. Is simultaneous the same thing? We're trying to get back to Rami Bar Chama's question that if someone sprinkles the blood of a chatas onto a beged that's tamei, and as it's touching the beged, which will require laundry, the blood is becoming puzzle for sprinkling. And we know that blood that's puzzle for sprinkling doesn't require laundry. So we're asking if simultaneously it's considered as if it was puzzle before it hit it. That's what we're asking. And now here, from Rabbi Lazar, we have a proof. That's what Rav Chizda says back, that it's a machlekes Rabbi Lazar Rabbanan according to a Rabbah. And the way Abaye answers it, I have a proof for you.
But you can't make something retroactive.
It's not retroactive, it's simultaneous.
But you just said when you're doing it and you make it tummy, it's as if it was tummy.
Which means that simultaneous is just like it was tamei. The question is, how do you look at something simultaneous? Do you look at it like after, or do you look at it before?
Whoa, that blows your mind.
Yeah, but if you look at it as before, that's retroactive.
No. When something happens at the moment, simultaneous, exactly.
Oh, so this is the old question: is there is no moment
right.
over?
Exactly.
It's either past or it hasn't happened.
Exactly.
Hello, show me a dictionary first.
No, show me a dictionary for present. There is no present because it's either.
Listen, you got to give them a point. That's the point.
That's the point.
That there is no present. That's the issue.
Yeah, go tell that to all the kids. I spent thousands of dollars on it. There was no present.
Exactly.
Somebody to make them
Yeah, but this water purifies tumas meis. This water purifies tumas meis. It doesn't purify nida. It's touching nida, which is not purifying. I know what it does when it touches tumas meis. It purifies it. So that's not my issue. The issue is there's another tumah here which it's not effective on. So now it's becoming tamei as does tamei water work for tumas meis.
Yeah.
So Rabbi Lazar is saying yes, and his proof is that you can sprinkle on a nida. So the Rabbanan would say that's not a proof because when you sprinkle on the nida, it was tamei the whole time when it touches her, so it's effective immediately. And Rabbi Lazar says, well, that's a proof that even if it's tamei, it's not a problem. Which means that the question is, how do you look at something that's simultaneous? Rava says a different explanation in the machlekes in Rabbi Lazar and the Rabbanan. The Kuli Alma.
I'm going to use that going through a red light with a cop. It wasn't really red because it didn't turn red yet. And if it was read before, was it after doing that?
So you getting the ticket.
Yeah, I don't think it worked.
Good luck.
by Makas Becheres. So
That's why it says
says
kechatzos.
it says first it says bachatzais. It says the Eberster said bachatzais. Moshe says it over. It says kechatzais. So he doesn't want to say exactly at chatzais. Kasha is that there is no such thing as exactly chatzais because it's either before or it's after. There's no moment of every moment could be divided in half, and in half of it is before it happens, and then you divide that. Everything is divided in half again till there is no moment of chatzais. It's either before or after. So how could it be that they died exactly at chatzais if there's no moment of chatzais? The answer is that there's no moment of death either. They're either alive or they're dead. So before chatzais they were alive, and after chatzais they were dead. But there's no moment. There's no moment of death. It's either alive or dead.
Wow, we are so out there.
It's like half Jewish.
Man, what's in this water?
It's the cat.
I didn't even drink it yet. What's in this water that you didn't even drink it?
Amen.
That's when you know it's good.
It was before. Wasn't even
So Rava says the Kuli Alman ain't done. Everyone holds that you can't judge something that was tummy earlier from something that happened simultaneous. Vahacha. So what's the machlekes over here about the water of the chatas, the water of the paraduma that becomes tamei if it's effective? Rabbi Lazar holds that the hazah requires a certain measurement, which means it doesn't work if you don't have enough. Mitzdarfen lazos. You can sprinkle a second time to make her tar. So what happens over here? When you sprinkle on the nida, the first drop that touches her becomes tummy because she didn't get the shear. And then once the shear gets to her, it comes into her like in a little bulge of a little amount of water. So as it's touching, she's not becoming tar. As it's touching her, so the water that's touching her is tamei until the whole shear gets onto her. So then she doesn't become tar. So now when the whole shear is there, it was actually tamei before. Well, it's not really simultaneous. It was half of it was tamei before it actually touched it. Now, the part that's tamei doesn't work because it's tamei. However, that's not a problem because one second. So, not that it doesn't work. Here, what we're saying. We're saying that even though part of it was tamei before the hazah actually worked, part of it was tamei before the hazah actually worked, because hazah tzricha shear. That's a proof that if it's tamei before and really simultaneously is not considered like it happened before. But here it's not perfectly simultaneous because half of it was tamei before it was effective. So that means it became tamei before it was effective, and it still works. That's a proof that that water that's tamei works. However, Rabbanan Sabri Hazayin Tzricha Shear says no. Hazayin Tzricha Shear, the first drop that touched it was already effective. So this is not a proof that if something simultaneous means that if it was tamei beforehand, it would actually work.
The first drops can't work. It does have a shear.
That's according to Rabbi Lazar. So the first drops can't work, which means that when did the first drops work? Only when the other drops get to it.
Right.
When the drops get to it, the first drops were tamei already beforehand. You see, this is a proof that meichatas that's or tamei beforehand is still effective. Right. However, according to the Rabbanan that say that you don't need a shear, the first drop that touches her was effective immediately. So I don't know anything about if it would have been tamei beforehand, would it be effective?
And the water changes from blood to tummy. Because when we wash our hands.
We're saying that tamei water is effective. That's what Abelaz is saying, that tamei water is effective. Yeah. For the paraduma. Even though it has these minor tumas on it, but it's still effective for the paraduma. Chatas psula. If the chatas was puzzle, so then you don't have to launder this, a new part of the Mishnah. You don't have to launder the garments when the blood of that chatas spritzes on the garment. Taner Rabbanan, we learned in a brisa, it says midama, from the blood of the chatas onto a garment. So it says midama, it says from the blood, and it says from, that means not all of it, but only from midam kshera, v'loi midam psula. It has to be from the chatas, from the kosher one, but not one that's puzzle. Rabbi Kiva says, Im hayala shasa kosher. If at one time it was eligible, then v'nifsala, and it became tamei. Damatan kibus, you're always going to require kibus. We mentioned this at the beginning. If it was never eligible, v'nifsala, I guess that's kibus. I'm sorry, means to launder, to wash it. Means that it was never eligible to be sprinkled on the altar, and it became pasul. The blood was never eligible. That's what it means. So in damatan kibus, then you don't have to launder the garment. Reb Shimon argues, and he says echad zeh in damatan kibus, that if it's pasul, whether it ever was eligible or was never eligible, doesn't need to be laundered. My time of the Reb Shimon. What's the reason for Reb Shimon? Ksiv, I saw it says any male kohen is allowed to eat the chatas. You could eat it. Uksiv, it also says midama, from its blood. So Isa means it, and midama, both of them have a mapake, right? The blood of her, right? Dama, and Isa. Yeah. So, which means that there's two exclusions. One of them is that a chatas psula that didn't have a shasa kosher. Chad, and one of them is lehechadais la shasa kosher. Both of them don't require kibas, don't require laundering. Rabbi Akiva, he says, Isa, the pasuk of Isa is prat l'truma, is coming to tell us that if truma was cooked in a vessel, that you don't need to do marika and shtifa on the vessel, as you would if you cook a chatas in the vessel. You have to purge the vessel if you cook a chatas in it, because it's the flavor, the absorbed flavor is going to become puzzle overnight. But by truma, you don't have such a problem. No, the problem with the karban is that you only have one day to eat it. So when you cook it, following morning, the flavor that was absorbed, even if you finished, you wipe the pan clean. So so that has to be purged out. Yeah, you have to do hagal on it. Like kasha, yeah.
That's what's being used by Kwani. Or do we have to purge it if it's used by?
We discussed once before that if you cook the shlamim after you cook the chatas, that would have been considered purging, because the shlamim adds another day, and if you use the pot again tomorrow, then you'll always be getting another day when you're purging. So that would work. But if you just want to leave it, it would have to be like constantly being used for the shlamim. Okay, and Reb Shimon, that doesn't say that. He says, why should I ever think that? But the question is on the Rabbanan. Why would the Rabbanan think that it needs to be? I'm not sure. Okay. Later we'll explain. I hope. Okay, so Reb Shimon says he doesn't need a pasuk for that, so he learns two exclusions for the blood of a chatas that touches a garment, that goes onto a garment, whether it had a shasakesha. One is whether it had a shasakesha, whether it didn't have a shasakesha. Both of them are do not require kibbutz. Okay. Nitas minatzavar ala beged eintan kibbutz. If the blood that got on the garment spritzed, there's a new Mishnah, spritzed straight from the neck, or minakeren, or after it was put on the altar, it spritz back. Maybe from the when you're pouring it down on the foundation, which means the remnant of the blood, it spritzes back on the garment. Ain't on kibbutz. Doesn't require laundering. We'll see in the Gemara what's going on. Nishbach ala ritzpa v'asafai ain't on kibbutz. If the blood spilled on the floor and you gathered it up, and after gathering it up, it gets on the garment, it doesn't require kibbutz, because the rule is ain't on kibbutz el dam shenaskabel bekeli v'rei laza. The only thing that requires kibbutz is once it's in a vessel and is ready for sprinkling, eligible to be sprinkled. That's when you have the problem. It was done in the Bryce Yachalitis when it's kibbutz. Perhaps if it spritzes from the neck at the shchita, it gets on his garment. Perhaps you should have to launder it. Says blood that's sprinkled. I only told you elabroila is only if it's eligible for sprinkling. Tanya Yidach, there's another brisa. Yachonitas mina keren mina yisaid. Maybe if it spritz back, the rebound off the corner or off the foundation. Yitan kibbutz tamalei mar she is a pratik kvar huza. Excludes what was already sprinkled. Once it's sprinkled already, it's not a problem. Nishbach ala ritzpa, if it fell on the floor and then you gathered it back up, so it also doesn't require. Hasu lamali. Why does it have to tell this to me? Matam shenishbach al ritzba asaf ein ton kibbutz lefi shein ton kibbutz al nam shenishkabel keli. Oh, so the nishbach al ritzba meant that it didn't pour from a keli. Nishbach al ritzba meant from the neck of the animal it fell on the floor. If it fell from a keli on the floor, we had a rule that you were allowed to pick it back up, right? There was something like that. But if it fell from the neck onto the floor and now you get it into the keli from the floor, that was not acceptable. And we're asking, why do you have to tell this to me? If you have the reason, it says no. This is exactly what it's saying. It's explaining what's the reason why it doesn't work is because so that's the end of the Mishnah. That it needs to be eligible, to be accepted in a vessel and also eligible.
Seems like it's so very practical. Otherwise, they'd always be washing.
Yeah.
Everybody be getting.
Just say.
Seems like blood would be getting on them all the time.
We're trying to.
And we said
Otherwise, they'd be.
we had an opinion before that when it gets dirty, you'd need new clothing.
Forget the laundry.
We're not going into animals.
Going into what?
Mark, Jeff.
Yeah.
Wait, so when they're shechting an animal on the grounds, right, and blood, before they get a chance to get it into the cup, the keli, to then take it to the altar, it spills on the floor. They can't pick that up
No.
to put it in the keli.
No, it has to come directly from the neck.
That's what we learned. But what did we learn about picking up that? They could do some with that.
That was by the Korban Pesach. After it was in the keli, they thought maybe it spilled. So there was one carbon maybe that the blood spilled and didn't end up getting sprinkled. So they would take from the floor and do one extra sprinkling.
No. We
kosher.
learned about where the floors were all full of blood.
Yeah.
That was just by Korban Pesach. I thought it had to do with what they did with that blood.
There was something else about what they did with the blood. It would drain down the hill, and they would use
But
it
it
for
wasn't
fertilizer.
For
No.
spritzing them. And this spritzing is talking about the two corners, the
Right.
four.
But by a chatas, it happens to be four corners.
Yeah, it's
Both
either four or the two, which
Right.
is four.
I had someone told me that his teacher was a sheikh, so the sheikhim shecht early in the morning, like 3 in the morning. They go to shecht, and then they would come. So they would come to class. So he would come to class and he would shower and come in. Everything would be nice and fresh, but he would forget the rim of his glasses. Always had like little dots of blood on it.
Oh,
It's funny, no, that's, my wife has paint that we saw.
No personal stories. Come on.
yeah,
Come on, move on.
No,
Okay.
that's why I'm to clean everything else.
Don't bring Robin into the show.
Behind every, whatever man.
well,
You know, try to keep it soft.
The shochet in Argentina. It was like many years ago, he was the only shochet around. So before, and he was also a moil. So before Pesach, he was working like round the clock. He was exhausted one day. He had to be able to go to the bris. He lived in a high rise. So he got dressed. He went to the elevator, and they have a mirror, on the walls. And he got to the elevator. He forgot to put his pants on.
It happens. Any stories like that?
He was so exhausted. He got dressed and he went out to
Many
the elevator. He
stories.
didn't have his pants on.
Many stories. Very common.
It's very, strange.
Okay. Roy Laza. We said that it has to be eligible for sprinkling. So Lamute Mai, what are you coming to exclude? Like what case are you telling me won't work? Lamute Kibel Pachas Mikdeaza Bekeli. Pachas Mikdeaza Bekeli. But Kibel Pachas Mikdeaza Beklizeh. Pachas Mikdeaza Beklizeh. If he has blood, that's not enough to sprinkle in one vessel and another vessel with the same amount. And then he mixes them together. That if that spritzes on a garment, it's not going to require laundry because the keli was not mekadesh the dam. Each one needed to have enough in it to be mekadesh the dam.
That's weird because we said when you're schlepping the korban up the kevesh, and that the kevesh was, and you had to go through the gap. There was the midpoint where we said that you got 50% of the kevesh, 50% of the tara, and that they joined to make 100%. So there you did allow joining.
I'm not sure. Let's see. I'm not sure. The Tanya started in a brisa. Talk about mechatas, the water of the paraduma. Let's say you put the ashes, the water that has the ashes in it, you put just a drop, less than the amount that's required for azah, into one vessel. Like kiddush, the water doesn't become holy. Even if you then mix them together,
water.
It wasn't enough water in each one. The Gemara has a question. Bedam mahu. What does this work also by the chatas? If you have less than a share in each vessel, so it says hilchasehi. Do we say that it's halacha Moshe Sinai regarding how much is required by the paraduma? Mihilchas alei gamrina, and you can't learn one thing to another thing. Or perhaps Pasa, my time. What's the reason by the paraduma we say that you need to have the right amount in one vessel? The ksiv v'tavel b'mayim. It says you have to take the hyssop and dip it into the water. It says b'mayim. It doesn't say b'mayim. It says b'mayim. That's the emphasis here. And ba means the, right? In the water, the definite, right? That means that you need to have enough water there. But if you don't have that, then it's not going to be good. But so hachanami, the Gemara says, 1 second. Over here also, by the chatas, it says v'taval badam. It doesn't say bidam, it says badam, in the blood, which means you need to have a measurement. Okay.
By the date of the sacrifice, they don't get enough blood.
It will. They would have to go back and get more blood, the right amount of blood in the vessel. Then they missed the chance. They have to bring another sacrifice if they can't sprinkle it. So, Tashima, let's get an answer to this. Amar Abzrika. Oh, isn't that a nice name for talking about sprinkling blood? Amar Abzrika, Amar Abelazar. Reb Zrika says in the name of Rebbe Lazar, Af Bedam like Kiddush, that the same thing applies. If you don't have enough blood, Kedei Hazah, Kedei Zrika, right? Sorry? Yeah. Amar Rava. Rava says, Af Bedam like Kiddush, Reb Zrika says in the name of Rebbe Lazar that it's not going to work if you don't have enough in the vessel. Amar Rava, Tanya, start in a brisa. Based on the pasuk, it says that the kohen puts his finger in the blood. The taval, it says he dips his finger in the blood. V'lei mesapig, he doesn't wipe it off onto the
rim.
and the rim. He doesn't use the rim. He dips straight down. It says badam. It says in the blood. Achi badam shir tefillah meikari, that there needs to be an amount that he can dip his finger in. Not if there was a little bit in one vessel and a little bit in another vessel, he mixed it together. Min adam, from the blood. What does that teach me? Min adam shebe'inyan. So it's like the blood that we're referring to when we're discussing this. I guess that means that whatever amount of sprinkling you're going to need for this carbon, you need to have that amount of dam. And sometimes you need 7 times. If it's a chatas pnimis, you need 4 times. Each one would have its own shear. It has to say the limit of badam, which means that there needs to be enough. It's going to go through each one. Because Rahman Avitaval, if it would only say that you have to dip his finger in it, could have thought that maybe if you don't have the right measurement originally. Which means, if it would only say Vitaval, I could have thought that maybe at the time of receiving the blood, there wasn't enough. Now that he caught it in 2 vessels and he mixed it together, now there is enough. I could have thought that that would be fine. So therefore, Kasav Rahmana Badam, it has to tell me in the blood, which means the amount of blood, the correct amount of blood that you had at the time of receiving the blood, the Kabbalah Saddam. It needs to be enough inside this one vessel. Because Rahmana Badam, if it would only say Badam, Avami, it didn't say Vitaval. If it would say Vitaval, then I would think you only need enough blood at the time of dipping the finger. So therefore it says Badam. If it would only say Badam and it didn't say Bataval, Havamina Filu Misapi, I could have thought that maybe you could wipe your finger along the side. Because Rahman of Bataval, it means you have to dip inside. Now it goes on, it says, what does it say? Min Adam. Min Adam Shabinyan Lamutimai. What are you coming to tell me? Amarava Lamuti Shirayim Shabetzba. That if there's leftover blood on the finger, that's not enough. You have to dip it in twice. You can't do 2 spritzes with one dipping. Every time you spritz, you have to dip again.
What do you have to clean his?
Let's see. Messiah Rabbi Lezer, Damar Rabbi Lezer, Shirayim Shabetz Psulim. So, does he have to clean his finger? Does it say in there that he has to clean his finger?
Yeah.
I was wondering. It says like, from one dip, that blood cannot be used.
Wait, the Gemara is going to discuss this in a minute. Let's see. Amalei Ravin Baravad Ravin Baravad says Rav Amar Talmidcha Amar Rav Amram. Your student asked a question in the name of Rav Amram. It says Tanina, we learned in the Brisa. Actually, he's a ton kibas. If a kohen is sprinkling the blood, and a little bit spritzes out from his hand onto a garment before he does the spritzing. So ton kibas, that's going to require laundry. Mishahiza, but if it gets onto the garment after he spritzes, then ain't ton kibas, then it doesn't require laundry. My love are we not referring to Hachikamer? That what he means to say is actually Gomer Melahazis Tankibas, that it's going to require laundry until he finishes doing all the sprinklings.
So it's not the first sprinkle that Bhagavad.
No, because here it happens. Yeah, here we're dealing with the chatas pnimis, where every sprinkle is ma'akev. By a regular chatas, I think it would just be one, one. First one is the main one. Over here, it would be the last one, and maybe even the pouring of the remnant of the blood. I think what it's asking is that Misha Hiza Ainton Kibos. What does it mean? Misha Hiza means if there's still blood remaining on the finger.
The full amount hasn't hit the garment yet.
Yeah, but after he sprinkles the right amount, he has a little bit of blood on his finger. If that blood gets on a garment, but he still has to sprinkle again, he's not finished all the sprinkling, but the blood that got on the garment, he's going to have to launder. Because he's not finished all the sprinkling. He has more sprinkling to do.
That's the job.
Sprinkle.
We're saying is that you can't, what's coming out over here is that you can't use the blood that's left on the finger for sprinkling. But if that blood still gets on the garment, it's going to need to be laundered. So the Gemara says, "Loi, that's not what's happening. It's not the blood left on the finger is going to require laundering. We're talking about over here, the difference if it was sprinkled or if it wasn't sprinkled means that before it leaves his hand, that's when, if that gets on a garment, then it's ton kibos. But once it leaves its hand, then ain't ton kibos. Not that you have to finish all the sprinkling in order for it to be not require laundering. But every sprinkling, there's the before it leaves his hand and there's after it left his hand.
How does if it didn't leave its hand, then it's bad as on it? If it didn't leave
as he was
its
going
hand,
like this, it touched his other
then
side.
it left his hand.
No, the left his hand in the sprinkle, but this wasn't the sprinkle. This was he dipped his hand in.
This was
right, I guess. Esvei Abaya.
It's like credit card swipe, touch, tap in the tap, Apple Pay.
Abaya has a question. Asks Rava. We're saying that the remnant of the blood is possible to sprinkle. So Gomer Milahazes, if he finished sprinkling the 7 times, that we're talking about a paraduma here, and he would sprinkle it from the Mount of Olives across. So what does he do with the remnant of the blood after sprinkling? He wipes his finger that has the blood on it into the para itself, and it gets burnt together with the para as you burn because it was burnt. Gamar it's only after he finishes sprinkling. But loy gamar loy. But in the middle of the sprinkling, every time he has to dip his finger and sprinkle again, he doesn't have to clean it, which means that the blood that's left on his finger is not a problem. So Amarlei, this is Hill's question as well. Amarlei, so Rava says back to Abaya, gamar mekaneachet beguf shel para, loy gamar mekaneachet spy. After he's finished, he wipes his entire hand. But before he finishes, he still has to wipe the finger. The diuk that you had is that you have to wipe the hand only when you're done, but that's only the whole hand, but the finger you still have to do in a bishleim, a gamar mekaneachet beguf shel parish number of a service per leina. They have to burn the part in front of him, and it says over there, what do you burn? You burn the skin and the flesh and the blood. See, if there was any blood left, you have to put it back on. But what do you wipe the finger on? Because if you're going to wipe it onto the para, it's going to get dirty from the para. The hairs are going to get stuck on it. Then when he's going to try to sprinkle, his finger's going to be dirty. Amar Abaya, bisvas mizrak. He wipes the finger on the edge of the cup. The ksiv kipayrei zahav. Kipayrei zahav is another word for the mizrak, for the bowl that was used for sprinkling. It's called kipayrei. Kipayrei means atonement and also means a cleansing. Why is it a cleansing? Because it cleanses the finger when he's in the middle of. Okay, let's leave it at the Mishnah.
That's interesting because he said that when he dips it in, he said he couldn't smear the blood